In today's conversation, I'm going to be visiting the historic studio of artisan blacksmith Lisa Wisdom. Lisa's 250-year-old forge is based on the site of a disused granite quarry at Trevone, and it's from here that you'll find her creating beautifully rich and rusty landscapes from the metal scraps she finds around her. The knowledge that she has gleaned from her training as both a jeweller and blacksmith informs her current practice, and you'll see through her work her ability to turn her hand to a variety of traditional metalwork and crafting methods. I speak to Lisa about how she found her path, her journeyman experience, and the discovery of the ancient forge in which she now works and lives with her husband David. Lisa shares about the craft of blacksmithing, the importance of doing a live demo, and what support there is for those interested in having a go. Lisa is currently the only professional woman blacksmith in Cornwall, and she tells me how she set up the Cornish Blacksmith Collective, a now thriving group of blacksmiths, metalworkers and enthusiasts that meet monthly to share skills, advice and support. If you're enjoying this, please make sure to like this video, leave a comment below, and subscribe to the channel for more of this type of content. I'm Mel Chadwick, and this is Creative Conversations. Hi everyone, thanks so much for tuning in to another Creative Conversation. And today we have Lisa. Welcome, Lisa.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for inviting me to take part.
Thanks for having us in your studio space.
I'm glad you found it because we're pretty difficult to find.
It's nice, a lovely location.
It is, yes.
So let's just hear a bit more about what it is that you do.
Okay, so I'm a artist blacksmith. I work entirely in metal, mostly in found metal. My training was as a metal worker, so I trained initially as a jeweller at Birmingham School of Jewellery, and then I trained as a blacksmith after that, a traditional blacksmith at Herefordshire School of Blacksmithing. I completed my training by working as a journeyman, so I travelled around the UK, France, North America and Canada, working with and for other blacksmiths, traditional blacksmiths, to kind of hone my techniques and to gain confidence to return to Cornwall and set up my own blacksmithing business. So when I started out, I was working as an architectural blacksmith. What I've ended up doing now is, or what I've become best known for, if you like, is making these metal landscape collage pictures out of found rusty metal. For me, that feels like I've found the kind of amalgamation of my training and techniques, metalworking techniques from the jewellery and the blacksmithing training, and turned it into my own unique metalworking style. I think it kind of requires quite a unique skill set, combined with a kind of creativity and a sense of artisticness that I've applied to the material. And so that's kind of come up with this fairly unique looking thing that is really hard to describe to people what I do.
But it is quite beautiful though to look at, I think.
Thank you. So I've been making them for about 9 or 10 years now. For me, they're the Cornish landscape because I'm Cornish, and it's my immediate landscape that I find the most inspiring. But for other people, they're Scotland or Wales or the Pennines or the lakes or any kind of remote moorland type landscape. They seem to speak to people. Often I don't really know what it means until the person who is going to rehome it sees it, and then they tell me what they see in it, and then it's like, oh yeah, that's the story with that piece.
You're saying that this is quite rare for a blacksmith to combine, these materials and make these artworks. So what triggered that in you to start creating in that way?
Well, that's all really tied in with the journey of me setting up my business as well. So when I finished my journeyman training.
Is that normal, by the way?
The journeyman training? With blacksmithing, yes. Okay. Because there's only so much you can learn at college, and actually the technique, once you've got the basics, which is get it hot and hit it, it's actually just experience and practice. It definitely takes a while to build up the stamina and the skills, or like the skill within the technique to be able to make it viable, to be able to make anything viably. The discovery of metal as a medium was when I was 11, and I did my first jewellery making course. It was a day course, and my dad had swapped a pot. He's a potter. He'd swapped a pot with a local jeweller for a day's silversmithing class for me and my sister. Wow. So that was my introduction to metal, and I just loved it. Like, it was just like I came back from that day just absolutely buzzing. And I was just like, I love it. And all of my pocket money and any money that I came across then after that point went on jewellery making tools and metal. And so by the age of 16, I had my own little business making and selling jewellery in my dad's pottery, and I was beginning to get frustrated at my lack of knowledge. Like, I was restricted by my own lack of knowledge of different techniques. So I went on to do an adult education class in jewellery making, and again kind of got so far with techniques then, but still felt restricted. There were a lot of things I wanted to do that I wasn't able to because I didn't have the tools or the knowledge. So that encouraged me to go into further education in jewellery making and go to Birmingham, which is like the place to study jewellery. It's got an amazing history, the Jewellery Quarter in Birmingham, and it's just kind of, I learned so much there about the historical aspect of it. The history has always really interested me as well, the history of the crafts, and with jewellery and blacksmithing, both just kind of like how many centuries they go back and how little has changed tools and techniques wise. I find really fascinating. So the historical aspect of working in the Jewellery Quarter in Birmingham was really inspiring. Even though as a real country bumpkin, I really struggled with city life, but it was a really invaluable experience. And in the jewellery making school there, in the basement, they had forges and an aspect of our course, which was 100% making. It was purely intensive. It was a BTEC national diploma qualification. So there was no written aspect to it. It was purely practical. Wow. We were in like 8 until 6 every day. Apart from there was a small element of design, but that really wasn't kind of emphasised on it at all. It was all about the making. And we had a tool making module, and we had to go down into the basement, and we had to light these fires and heat metal up, and it was just so alchemical. It was really exciting. I was really fascinated by blacksmithing and by tool making from that point on. That was my first introduction to blacksmithing, that it even existed. I didn't know that it existed. And I find that really incredible, because I was brought up here in Cornwall absolutely immersed in the craft scene. Yeah. My parents are both master craftspeople, and they're very kind of well known, and they were really rooted in the craft tradition of Cornwall and St Ives. Like, they introduced me to every single craft you can think of as a child, but not blacksmithing.
Isn't that incredible?
And I think that's really, I mean, it's a real sign of how much the craft has disappeared. Yeah. You know, like maybe in the last 100 years or something like that. It's really like it's declined to being a tiny fraction of what it used to be, the craft.
But in a way, it was your path then for it. It wasn't someone saying, this is what I think you should go into. It almost makes it a lot more special to you, because you found that, and you were drawn to it.
Yeah, absolutely. My whole story has felt like a journey that was meant to be. Not always easily, with a lot of foundering and kind of trauma along the way, but as we all do on our life path. But yeah, it's like when it's clicked into place, it's just like, yeah, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And that's really amazing feeling.
Okay, so you discovered this craft that you really wanted to push into, and you had great role models in your parents for setting up this kind of business. So how did you and where did you first set up then, and what did it look like?
Or I returned to Cornwall after kind of travelling and training, ready to set up my business, and I knew I wanted to set up in the Falmouth area because that's kind of where my friendship group was, and it's a really beautiful landscape. It's kind of extra difficult when you're a blacksmith because there's so many kind of like misconceptions about what blacksmithing is and how it's going to be really noisy and all this kind of stuff, which it really isn't. I started at Mayerporth Beach, and I walked from Mayerporth Beach, and I went down every little side turning from the beach and asked at every single farm if they had an outbuilding for rent, and just told them like who I am, what I'm doing. I was so brave. I don't think I'd be able to do that now. And
it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and like the third place I came to, the farmer was just like, yeah, I've probably got an outbuilding here. Yeah, and you know, do you want to stick a caravan in the corner of the field as well? And I'll do it all for like, I think I was paying about £60 a week or something initially. Workshop and living space. It was just a caravan, but you know, tiny little space, and it was filled to the roof with the farmer's junk. So part of the deal was like,
you had to clear it out.
I had to clear it and get a new roof on it and stuff like that. But it was absolutely perfect, and I knew it wouldn't be forever. But because I was starting out with £2,000 to my name, well, I was really lucky with my training, because both jewellery making training and the blacksmithing training, you come out from the courses with your entire toolkit, because that's the point of those courses. Like you've spent those years making your own tools, and so that you're ready. The idea of them is that you're ready to set up as soon as you finish training, which is really clever. It's such a brilliant idea. So I had a forge because I'd built one at college, and I had my tongs and I had my hammer, and you know, like I had the jewellery making kit, and I was lucky because I was starting out with 2 trades, so I could quite quickly be making jewellery and doing the forged ironwork. And in this tiny little space, I knew it wouldn't be for that long, that I would need more space before too long, but I would just kind of make the tools that I needed or buy the tools that I needed as the jobs came in, kind of thing. Obviously at first I didn't have any commissions on, so I decided that what I would do would be to ring up all of the craft fairs that are happening throughout the summer months, and I would offer demonstrations, blacksmithing demonstrations, because my forge is portable, because it's just a bolt together one that I built at college. So I could just chuck it all in the back of my car and go and set up at a show somewhere and just demonstrate and sell whatever I was making. It was such a good way of starting out, because you get your pitch for free when you're demonstrating generally. And doing these events, these shows, they're one of the biggest outlays for a craft business, is buying your pitch. So it was just such an ideal way to start out.
And is that how you started then to make a name for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I was really beginning to realise at that point that it's a really unusual profession for a woman. So in lots of ways, like that was actually really useful, because it meant that I was really visible and people remembered me, because I'm the only woman blacksmith in Cornwall.
Are you still the only?
I still am. Wow. I know, despite trying really hard to get more. There are a lot more people out there and in Cornwall, both men and women, who are interested in blacksmithing and who are taking it up as a hobby, but professional blacksmiths. Still the only one in Cornwall. Yeah.
So you were getting yourself known on the craft fair circuits.
Yeah.
Did you start picking up commissions then that way?
Yeah, absolutely. Things really started rolling from then, and that was really quite quickly when the workshop was becoming way too small, and I ended up having to rent another space on that farm. So I'd been running my business for 2 years by that point, and it was then that Rob Higgs, who owns Trevone Quarry, who I've been friends with for years and years anyway, he'd just bought this quarry and thinks there might be an old forge on it, but isn't really sure. Do I want to come up and have a picnic and we can have a look around? And I was like, yeah, this is great. You know, he's a friend as like living the dream. He's bought this bit of land. So I came up here and we fought our way through gorse and brambles, and there was this doorway, and we kind of hacked through the doorway, and there was a tree growing inside, and it was this building.
Wow.
This building, hacking over to the right hand side, the north end of the building, past the tree, there was the hearth, this enormous forge hearth that is an integral part of the building, that immediately you could see, this is the forge, this was the forge, and this was built to be the forge. It's always been the forge here. And we've since found out that it's about 250 years old, this building. It had a, you're going to start seeing the link here, it had a completely collapsed in rusting corrugated roof, fragments of which we were having to just clear. We were just clearing into these big piles, and the other buildings that were emerging from the undergrowth and the post-industrial waste that was here left on site, just piles of this rusting corrugated tin, because all of the buildings, the industrial buildings here, were clad walls and roof with the stuff. So and over the years it had just kind of aged to this amazing patina, and the decay of the edges was just like the colour palette of it was really unique, yet it was also just like absolutely Cornwall, because there's so much rusting tin around in Cornwall.
To the colour.
Yeah, so it was already the colour palette. So I was picking up these little fragments and going, oh, that looks like a hedgerow. Oh, look at that. Doesn't that look like a sky? Or, you know. So that's where the idea came from. There was a competition upcoming. I decided to make a kind of collage-y picture thing out of some found bits of metal and enter it for this competition. It was a fine art competition, so like paintings.
Yeah.
I thought, I'll just do it, just try it out as an idea, and I entered it and I won the competition.
Oh wow.
And the prize was to have an exhibition of my paintings. So I was like, oh wow, I have to develop this. And so I made a little series more of it, kind of developing the idea. They were really quite different to how they are now. I've really evolved and refined the technique. So that kind of really started rolling with the pictures. So I was still running my blacksmithing business, and I had an employee, another blacksmith. We were doing a lot of tool making, traditional tool making. We were producing a range of interior hardware to sell in shops and galleries, so like pokers and candlesticks and, you know, companion sets and things. We were working on some really big projects, and this space was perfect for it because it was just there was so much more room. I started needing this kind of clean, dry space for the jewellery making and the picture making that was kind of evolving. So that's where this building and vision of the landlord, just in letting the creative tenants here custom build their own spaces, was just perfect, because the building could evolve as I was and as my work was. So you come in through the front door into what is the kind of oldest part and still really quite unchanged part of the building. So you can see the enormous hearth, the granite hearth. The forge would have been predominantly supplying the granite quarrying. So they would have done all the tool making here and all of those jobs like straightening chisels and resharpening chisels and things like that. They were doing a lot of working on long straight bars, to the extent that there's a hole in the back of the hearth for the bars to pass all the way through to outside of the building, which is really unique. And also another unique aspect of Cornish blacksmith hearths on quarries is that they're side blast. So the air flow comes from the side through the wall and into the bottom of the fire. So that means you can get long straight bars into the fire and out the other side. Normally blacksmith's forges are either blasting from the back or from the underneath. Okay. That's quite an interesting kind of little historic kind of heritage thing of here. And this is one of the oldest still working forges in Cornwall. You can see the marks on the hearth where the blacksmith would have tested the hardness of the chisels. Yeah. So there's those little pitting in the lintel in front of where the fire is lit. I've now converted the forge because I'm really interested in exploring the role of the craft of blacksmithing today, and environmentally how kind of to try to be more aware of what is actually kind of supporting a very damaging kind of fossil fuel and the steel industry and things like that, and how we can tackle that in a kind of sensitive way that is still remaining honest to the craft. But I'm not really sure how it's going to work, but it's a dialogue that I'm kind of trying to start amongst the Cornish blacksmithing community. And so I've converted my hearth to run from charcoal, so now I've flattened the bed of the forge and put a different airflow system in, so that I can run it from locally sourced sustainable charcoal, which is kind of going back to using a fuel that blacksmiths would have used. Yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah, I was going to say, what would you normally have there instead?
Well, so commonly we use coke, which is coal with all the impurities burned out of it, if you like. So it's a kind of clean, hot burning fuel. Okay. It's very comparable really with charcoal. It just became, I guess, a cheaper fuel to use, so it became more common. You get through a lot more charcoal. Yeah. Because, it just burns away quicker. Okay. Coal feels a lot more damaging than charcoal does. Yeah. Charcoal, I like it as a fuel to use. But whether it's viable to use it when you're kind of commercially blacksmithing, and that's kind of, I feel like that's the debate that needs to happen. Is what is a blacksmith now? Is a blacksmith just trying to frantically compete with metal fabricators who are using angle grinders and welders, or is a blacksmith harking back to a much more gentle, slow pace, different role? We need a different role. We need to be recognised as having a different role, rather than being forced to try and churn out all of these gates and railings and things for the lowest price possible. So it's really difficult. I've done the kind of the heavy metal processing part of making my pictures. I bring them into here, and I'm starting to kind of work out my compositions and to rivet the layers together. And then I'm sitting at an easel with my charcoals and working into the surface of the metal with charcoals. It's got a really beautiful light in here. Clients come and visit me here as well. So it's a versatile space. The whole thing is a really versatile space. Yeah,
because you've got your framed pieces on the walls as well, and it's really it feels like a little gallery, actually, a gallery space.
Yeah, that's good. That's what I was going for.
But it's nice that you've got this big desk as well that you can work on.
Yeah, and I've got these drawers
tools
with the fragments of metal. So it also doubles up as my office. So I've got this drawer here, which is my office drawer, which is the printer and the laptop. Every part of this place is versatile. I feel like it can be dual purpose. Forge is the biggest space. That's 50% of the building. And then my home is the kind of this little end here. And this opening here would have been the original door, probably had a sliding door. We've put that wall in.
Oh, okay, so that would have been bigger. So this
would have been the whole forge.
Okay, got it.
And then that end where our home is a more modern extension. It was still derelict when we moved up here, but it's breeze block. It had a forge in the end, but it was completely broken. So and dangerous. So we actually ended up taking that down, using a hole in the roof as a wood burner chimney, and installing a wood burner in there. There was so much rubbish here, and the ground was so poisoned from all the years of granite quarrying. Lots of local people come past, and we've gathered lots of anecdotes over the years. And one of them is that when the quarry was working, this whole valley, it's a beautiful wooded valley, was just covered in white dust, and there was a lot of waste, a lot of quarry spoil everywhere here. So the landscape has been really, really affected by the granite quarrying here. It's been really changed. So we're not even on ground level here. This 200-year-old building is built on top of quarry spoil. So when you go into the backyard, you can see the cutaway of what the ground looks like here. So when you go into the backyard, you're on river level, which is kind of the natural ground level. And then as you look, you can see just these enormous boulders. They're all stacked on top of one another, and that's what this building is perched on. So we're on hundreds of years worth of granite quarrying.
And that just shows how long it's going on as well, you know? Yeah.
It's been a really interesting place to kind of bring back to life.
Yeah.
Like I talk about in my artist statement, the finding the archaeology of industry, and that's really what it feels like, because it's post-industrial. There's not many places that are post-industrial. Yeah. We're well into what happens when the land is trying to recover itself from industry, and that's what's so special about here, is that nature has come through that barren, white, dusty landscape that was being blown up has now become this like oasis of green, and it's really done it without human intervention. I mean, you saw for yourself how remote it is to get here, and that's quite unusual in this little island, isn't it, to have somewhere that is kind of...
There are still these remote places.
And to quietly and sensitively live here and observe nature, and how just with doing things like, you know, we compost. We have an extensive composting system. My husband is really into compost making, and so it started out because there's no soil here at all. We're on those big boulders. There's no soil, and so we've made soil, and that's really exciting. Seeing what happens when you make soil and then you plant things. And you know, our garden is kind of 10 years into being a garden, and it's really only in the last 2-3 years that we've actually been able to plant much in it, because there's a bit more than that much soil now. You can actually almost dig a shovel in, which is really exciting. You don't have to use a pickaxe anymore, which is what we've had to do to plant trees and things.
It's incredible.
So,
it's not just you here. There's a few others in this area, and they're all kind of doing creative jobs.
Yeah, we've got 12 creative businesses here, really wide ranging, and it's been a really lovely evolution of kind of growth of the place. We liken it to an industrial estate. So this is what it is. It's a new model of industrial estate, where with the emphasis on sustainability, low impact, and just kind of much more percentage of land to person, if that makes sense. So rather than development per person. So it's kind of, Rob, our landlord, has really kind of curated a community who have very slowly over the years kind of taken on a building and brought it back up to create a space that suits that business. And it's all using waste, post-consumer waste. So it's all reusing and recycling. I feel like it's a really sensitive kind of connection with back to what the heritage of this place was as a quarry. But, you know, so much life has moved back in here.
It's quite inspiring space, I'm guessing, for you as well, to work here. And it feels like that's what your artwork here is. It's you're picking what was left and you're giving it a new purpose. And I think everybody who has their workshops here is fed in the same way. If you're here, you can't help but kind of notice and be inspired by it. So, it's great. It is. And that's grown over the years. So when I was the second tenant to move in up here. It was very bleak landscape when I first came up here, and you literally would go for weeks without seeing anybody up here. You have to be quite independent or used to your own company.
I was. I loved it. I love it now, but I loved it back then as well. I loved the remoteness of it back then. But I really like how it's evolved, and how, we've kind of we've linked up with a much wider community now. So we're kind of linked up with the village up there and the village down there, and and we're this shortcut between a footpath shortcut between two villages. So we've got to know, and they've got to know us.
They know who you are.
They know who we are, and they bring me jobs. I get all sorts of things.
Well, you become part of the community. You're not just an isolated bubble.
Yeah, exactly.
You actually are part of the community that's around you, which I think is really important.
Yeah, because as we were talking about earlier, just that when you're self-employed, small business owner, you can be really isolated, and to have other businesses around, it's just it's so supportive.
So you actually have helped form a Cornish blacksmith collective.
That's right, yeah.
Can you tell me a bit about that and why you decided to set that up?
It's a good point to talk about it, because we were just talking about the community aspect of being here at the Quarry and having the other businesses, and that's kind of been slightly inspired and has inspired the forming of a group just for blacksmiths, because it's a really isolating craft. We can't generally afford to have an employee. You're a very small business, and it's a very physically demanding job. Most forges are kind of attached to living space, so a lot of blacksmiths live where they work, and that does kind of mean that you never go anywhere. We formed the group. It was me and another blacksmith locally who kind of actually made it happen in the end, having talked about it a bit. I'm a doer, so I was just like, come on, let's not talk about this anymore, let's just make it happen, and designed a logo, and just kind of we're a group now. I was inspired by when I first set up my business of that 2 summers of just doing all the shows and demonstrating at the shows, how much business that generated. And the idea was just kind of what if more of us do it? So we put on, it's more of an impact display. And as a collective, we kind of promote the craft of blacksmithing, but we also promote our own and each other's businesses. And it's become a really amazing thing where we will pass jobs to one another if we're too busy, or if it's not really what we're specialised in, and that person might do a better job. So you kind of we pass work around to each other. I host a monthly blacksmithing event here at the Forge, which is predominantly for the professional blacksmith community, but also for their students and apprentices to come together and just share skills, have a go at things, just talk about blacksmithing, and it's become this really lovely event that's really kind of knitted the group together, more so even than going out and doing shows collectively, because at the shows it's work.
You've got attention as well. You've got people, haven't you? To talk to.
We're also demonstrating as a group. We're out demonstrating kind of pretty much most weekends through the summer months at steam rallies, agricultural fairs, all those kind of things. We do have a go sessions, give out business cards, and have a little we have a marquee where we have tables, so each business has a table selling their wares and things like that, and it works so well. A lot of other crafts people have kind of gone, I wish my craft was like the blacksmiths, because you seem like such a friendly bunch. And it's we didn't want it to become too much of a kind of institution, because I think that becomes quite exclusive. So there was a lot of discussion about what we would call ourselves, and the Cornish Blacksmiths Collective, we thought it sounds friendly, and it just sounds like a group of people who just kind of get together and talk about blacksmithing, and they're in Cornwall. I think we've got most of, if not all of the professional blacksmiths involved in the group now, which is great, and we're all definitely getting a lot more people in, a lot more students that we're sending off to college and to do training and things like that, and that a lot of the students they're getting to quite a high level of proficiency with it, but they're still kind of oh no, I don't want to set up a business. in it is too hard. And that's what I was talking about earlier, just like blacksmithing has got to kind of redefine its role, I think. And
I think you probably are going towards helping that though, and also if you've got students coming along and seeing what you guys doing and also the support that is there, then it may push them to think, actually I can set up my own forge, or I can set up my business. We hope so. But then also there's a lot of the professionals that are there, you know, there's an aspect of our kind of get-togethers that is kind of like, oh, it's really hard, isn't it? Like I'm really struggling at the moment, and you know, so again that's kind of like reroute your work, you know, the commissions that you're taking on to perhaps take you off into a different route. And I feel really lucky that I got to that stage quite early in my career where I could choose, because I was financially really struggling running the architectural blacksmithing business, because I needed the employee, because I just needed somebody to hold the end of a bar sometimes, or, you know, swing a sledgehammer, or, you know, it's heavy physical work. So I was struggling with that aspect of it, and I don't know how long I could have gone on with that. So I feel really glad that I've kind of found the metal pictures as my thing, and could kind of evolve that. I mean, the blacksmithing has always run alongside anyway, so I do take commissions for the ironwork, but it's working purely to commission really. So I might take 3 or so commissions a year with the blacksmithing side of things, which I can kind of fit in around my metal picture kind of making, and that's working really well. So I'll be making things like a bird feeder stand or a balcony railing or something like that, and I'm just taking projects that are interesting to me, that I think might be quite exciting, that I can have artistic license on, and that so they're not trad, they're not cut and weld railings. They're forged railings, which is what every blacksmith dreams of being able to do, is like 100% forged work. But it's really hard to find a client who will pay for something like that, because it's a much slower process than a cut and weld job that a metal fabricator could do. I see what you mean.
And even though the look of the work is really of the two different styles of metalwork is really different, a lot of people are led on the quote, on the price. and so again, that's kind of where I feel like blacksmiths need to kind of go a much more artistic, almost sculptural route, and that is where a lot of the newly trained blacksmiths are coming out with a lot more kind of artistic look, style to their ironwork, which is just, I don't know, it's stunning ironwork. It's really and it's really contemporary, and I think it's really exciting way for blacksmithing to be going. And it's just a shame that like there's a portion of the blacksmithing community that are just stuck in that rut of like having to take the railing jobs in the cut and welds, with a tiny fraction of, maybe if they're lucky, of forge work in it, that they can actually do the hot hammering metal. But that's why we train as blacksmiths, because it's the fire element, it's the element of like getting the metal hot and hitting it on the anvil, and how you can manipulate this hard, like seemingly impossible material into the most beautiful shapes and curves and things, and you just cannot do that any other way.
No. Is that your favourite part of the process in terms of
definitely every blacksmith, I think. It's the kind of alchemical change that the material undertakes when it's hot. It's just like butter, or you know, it's really, it feels really magical. It feels really I mean, it's hard work, but it's really satisfying when you've got the efficiency and the technique down, that you can do it. You know, like it doesn't have to be physically demanding if you're doing it all day, if you're being efficient with how you're doing it. So you're working the metal hot enough, and you're being efficient with how you swing your hammer, and you're letting the anvil lift the hammer for you. All those kind of things you learn with experience.
And like you say, that takes the years. Those are the years of experience that have gone into that. Which is why then I guess your price point and how you charge people is going to be completely different to someone who's just doing the more what did you call it? Just the
cotton weld, the fabricating.
The fabricating,
yeah.
Because they're not just paying you for the material or the time. They're paying you for all the experience that you've had with using your tools.
Yeah, absolutely. That's as much what we're about, going out and demonstrating as well, because that's really helpful to show people what is behind what they're asking us to make. Gives them that understanding. Like you find coming into artist studios, and you were saying how nice it is to just, and inspiring it is to see how other people work and the spaces they're in. It's that same education of just kind of like, it's sharing the process, the technique, in order to help your customer understand why they're paying what they're paying for it.
And what the worth of it is as well.
Yeah. I think something else that's been really helpful for me is having gone into the fine art world, and I know you wanted to talk a little bit about craft.
Yes, whether you term how do you describe yourself? Would you describe yourself more of an artist or a craftsperson, or you in between? Or
I think I'm straddling the two. I think I'm a craftsperson. I think that because that's what my training and my background is, and still very much the environments where I'm selling my work is craft orientated. And I don't know whether that's just because that's what I know and that's the world that I know. I haven't really tapped into the fine art scene, which is a different scene.
Yes. But you could see those pieces just hanging in galleries, couldn't you?
Yeah, very occasionally I'm getting approached by fine art galleries, as opposed to galleries that also sell craft or that they're craft oriented. The pricing is so different.
Really?
Fine art to craft. And because I'm straddling the two, so the events that I'm going to and that I'm selling my work at are craft events, but I've got fine art prices on my pictures and I'm getting them. Sometimes I feel, or at least in the beginning I felt really, when I was first making the pictures, I was just like, why? I don't understand why people are paying, £340 for a picture for their wall, but they won't pay £50 for a poker that's taken me the same amount of time to make and a lot more sweat. And I think that's really interesting, like that perception of what something is worth. Functionality. As soon as it's got function, it's worth nothing. What?
It's strange, that, isn't it? Yeah, you're competing, aren't you? I think competing with industry on the craft level. So you get quite confident, I think, as you go with pricing.
That was kind of what I was meaning earlier with the kind of fine art prices against the functional item prices, and having that aspect to my practice has given me a lot more confidence to charge the right amount for my ironwork, for my blacksmithing work, because it all comes around of how you present yourself, I think, and rather than being apologetic about my prices, I feel really privileged because I'm doing okay, so it doesn't matter if I gain or lose the commission, but that's just because that's where I am in my career now, where work is beginning to roll in. And I know that when I was 2, 5 years, 6 years into my business, I was just apologetic, and I just had to say yes to everything. So I realised that I'm really lucky to be able to state the right price for what I would make that thing for, and if they want it, they'll go for it, and if they don't, then that's fine. I wish I could tell my past self that. Because
know your worth.
All those jobs, and I'm sure anybody who makes anything for a career will know what I'm talking about, of all those jobs that you just end up hating in the end, because they've cost you so much time and money, and you're just not getting anything for it. And you end up feeling really bitter about it, about what you're creating. And I feel like that's a really kind of toxic creation to put out into the world. And I would rather feel good about what I'm getting.
It's the respect, isn't it? It's mutual respect between the customer and you. There's the mutual respect there.
It is such a complicated thing for a creative to ask for money for their creations. That's full of Oh gosh, so much, isn't it?
It changes the relationship, basically.
Yeah.
I sometimes think if you're going to have a hobby, have a hobby, and if you love that hobby, don't bring money into it, because you'll change how you view that hobby.
Yeah.
But when you're actually doing it for your full-time job and money has to be involved, you have to find a way to be at peace with that.
Yeah.
And just also, like you say, know your worth, know the experience that you're bringing.
Yeah.
And because if you don't, no one else will.
No, exactly.
You'll just be taken for granted, and
you
won't have the respect that you deserve. And then eventually you won't be able to do what you want to do, because you won't be able to pay bills.
It's not viable.
Yes.
It's
you won't be able to live.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's always the interesting thing when you talk to creative people who have that emotional attachment to their work, that they find it really hard to let it go as well.
Yeah.
And that's perhaps a kind of deeper description of what you were just saying, of just kind of like you're in the wrong profession then, or you're trying to force a living out of something that you love too much. And it's not that I don't love what I'm making, but for me, where my income comes from is much more about the process for me than the finished product, the finished item. I feel like with my pictures especially, I love the process of them. I love finding the metal, and I love finding the pieces that work together. And it's like putting together a jigsaw when you're doing collage as well, because it's just kind of like, that doesn't fit, turn it around that way, oh yeah, that's it works, and it's just that kind of satisfaction of like putting together a puzzle. Once it's done, then it's just like that's it. Now that is for somebody else to take on to its next journey of like where it is, the description of it, where it is, who, where they bought it from, who the artist is, like all that kind of stuff is just like, I'm putting that out into the world now, and that's really nice. And maybe that's the approach that you need as a creative in order to be able to let your work go. Just that kind of knowing when it's finished. For me, I love meeting the people who are taking the work home, because we're both getting the continuation of the story, and I feel a bit bereft when my work sells through a gallery, because I don't know who it's gone to. I really like to I like to be able to kind of meet the people and find out what it means to them.
You've worked on this piece, I don't know how many months you might have worked on this piece. But then knowing where it's going and knowing the person who's buying it isn't just buying it because they think, oh, I should buy some art, or but they've got the connection to it. It kind of finishes it, makes it complete, doesn't it? It's done the job. You've done the job.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, very, very often, they come back for more. Because they've got that personal connection. And they're like, oh, Lisa, how are you? So lovely of you to show us your studio. Like all this kind of stuff, which is really nice. I might not remember them.
But they will remember that experience.
Really like, it's a really big part of this thing that they're living with. It's really interesting.
On your website, you've got a quote that says, "And if it won't break, finally, when you have hammered on it with stone and then steel and blasted it and burned it and put it out for the water to erode and the sand blown by the wind to wear away, then you must stand and wait for grace, pure grace, to come along and break it for you, because it must break." And that's by R.V. Cassell, 1974.
I love that you found that quote on my website, because nobody's ever picked that out before, but it's I just think it's what an amazing paragraph. I can't remember what context it was in this novel that I was reading, but it just it was the shining paragraph in that novel for me, and I wrote it in my notebook. And I was just like, the more I read it, the more I was just like, that's really like work, isn't it? That just feels like such a good description of my process and my journey in my life. It's just, and also the material that I work with, it felt like it really it was speaking about, the craft and the heritage of the craft, the tradition, the ancient tradition of the craft of blacksmithing. Yeah, I love that ending of the grace. Just let grace. It's just kind of like there's got to be this beautiful calm in the process after. So it's like after all of the bashing and smashing and moving and cutting and banging and and that's after all the weather has done all of its stuff on the material as well. And it's just like, and then just peace on it, and just so I feel a little bit like the grace part of it is of my process is when I come to the easel. After all of the hammering and banging, and I just have this, often I'll either just have no noise at all, and just like the nature soundtrack here. We've got the river flowing around the forge, and which you can constantly hear, and you have the bird song and the insects, and the kind of noises of other people working. I really love that soundtrack, and I feel like I really need a soundtrack alongside my drawing into the metal, because it's the drawing in that with the charcoals that I feel like really pulls out the ghosts of what I can see in the metal, and for that I just need this beautiful calm, and it's a really different headspace to the
frantic,
to other parts of the process, and and there's loads of observation and just contemplation, just sitting and staring at a piece of metal to really pull out what I can see in there. So that's really nice. So I'm glad you spotted that.
It's a nice summing up really of your process and your work.
I feel like it is.
Okay, so one last kind of question, and that is, if there was someone watching today who just really sparked their interest in blacksmithing, what kind of advice would you give them? What would you say to them?
Have a go. Go and have a go. Absolutely. I think, as we've already shown, the blacksmithing community is so welcoming, and that's not just the Cornish blacksmithing community, but worldwide. I think because it's such an endangered craft, I think all of the people who have gone into it for the right reasons. They've gone into it because they're really interested in the history of it. They're really interested in the heritage of it. They definitely a huge element of the need to pass on the skills to new generations, and which I think makes the craft a very, very welcoming welcoming craft, because we want to pass on the skills. We don't want for it to die out.
You don't want to kind of keep all of it secret, or
no, not at all. No, whereas actually back through historical times, blacksmiths would have been a figure of mystery. Now it's not so much about that, and actually a lot of the knowledge has been lost. And a lot of blacksmiths are kind of like, trying to relearn how on earth that person made this thing that is in a museum somewhere or something, and to kind of relearn that, I think. But there are loads of blacksmiths, probably most blacksmiths supplement their income by teaching. So most blacksmiths will do a have a go session, whether that's just for a morning or a whole day, and that's such a good way of knowing whether actually you're kind of cut out to do it as well, because it is quite physically demanding. It doesn't have to necessarily be. Obviously, it depends on kind of what niche you get into, and of course anybody can do it, whatever kind of strength or structure they have to their body. But it's really worth just having a go, because I think you have a go and you're really, really fired up about it and you're loving it, then it's really worth taking it further. But just from having a go, you'll know whether you're going to get the bug for it or not.
Okay, so that's the advice then, is have a go.
Definitely have a go. It's a really accessible craft to set up in your back garden. Like, you don't have to become a professional at it. You know, you can just play, and there's so much fun in just playing with it. YouTube is a fantastic resource for you know, how-to videos, and there's tons on there about blacksmithing, tons and tons of, you know, of all levels of blacksmithing, and you can go down proper rabbit holes. Working with your hands is just so amazing, isn't it? It's so beneficial, it's so good for us. I think everybody should do it.
You should do it. One final question. I know you've said you've struggled to answer this, so
you're just going to put me on the spot.
I'm just going to put you on the spot and see if you actually can just give me, what 3 words would you use to describe your work?
You know, I've asked everybody I know to sum up my work in 3 words, and just like, I don't know. How would you sum it up in 3 words?
Moody, evocative.
Good one.
Layers.
Layers. Yeah.
There
that's
we
a good
go.
one. Yeah. That's good. That's good, I think.
Well, I'm not going to force you to give me any more words. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for talking to us and discussing everything to do with blacksmithing, well, to do really about your journey, and it's been really interesting to hear it.
It's been great to chat with you, and thanks for coming.
Thank you. And thank you guys for watching, and if you want to find out more about Lisa and her work, I'll put all of the links in the description box below, and if you have any questions, just put them in the comment section, and we'll answer them, or I'll ask Lisa to answer them. But thank you again guys for watching, and I'll speak to you again real soon.